So without further ado, here's our speaker, Andrew Chall. Andrew Chall is the founder of the 501c3 Greens for Dreams, and he will be presenting about how to begin your journey with community service, where he will explore the opportunities and steps it takes to create an effective community service project. A rising senior from Concord, Massachusetts, Andrew Chall started the golf organization Greens for Dreams in 9th grade and has since taught over 50 students golf and partnered with over 35 companies, including Dick's Sporting Goods, the Boston Red Sox, and CVS to organize 2 charity golf tournaments. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Chall.
Thank you, Kyler, for that introduction. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this talk today. Hopefully by the end, it brings you something valuable. And today I will be talking about beginning your journey toward community service. And this will be a step-by-step guide. So there will be a lot of opportunities for you to engage, provide input, type in the chat. And then, like I said, hopefully by the end, have your own idea and start a community service project in either your school or local community. So like Kyler said, my name is Andrew Chow. I'm a rising senior. I'm from Massachusetts. And one of my main interests is golf. So I've played golf for 8 or 9 years now. It means a lot to me. I play competitively. I'm also the captain of my school's golf team. So golf is kind of one of my main interests and passions outside of the classroom. So that's what I'm going to be talking, and that's what I'm going to be centering my talk around community service today. So here's a quick outline about tonight's presentation. So like I said, this presentation is a step-by-step guide where you will have the opportunity to provide input. So kind of what I mean by step-by-step is I'm going to provide a detailed guide of each of the steps that I think are important in starting a community service project. And so after most of the steps, I'm going to be opening it up to you guys and asking you guys to provide your ideas, your input, any initiatives that you might start, and I can provide feedback or my thoughts on your ideas. And then at the very end, after I'm done with presenting all of my steps and all of my ideas, I'm going to invite all of you guys to be panelists and share your ideas. So like speaking and unmuting and turning on your camera. So before I get into kind of all of the steps that I think are important in starting a community service project, I'm just going to talk about Greens for Dreams, which is the nonprofit that I started, and kind of my experience and motivation with the work that I do. So Greens for Dreams is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and I'll explain the meaning of 501c3 later, but it basically means it's a nonprofit recognized by the federal government. But Greens for Dreams, it raises money for Boston Children's Hospital in 3 main ways. So the first way is affordable golf lessons. So right now we teach golf lessons to beginners in the local area, so the local community, Massachusetts and New England especially. And we teach it to beginners of all different ages, so kind of ranging from, like toddlers, 5-year-olds to middle age and even older people as well. So if you look at the photo on the right, that's actually a picture of me teaching, I think, 4 or 5-year-olds. And then the photo on the left that kind of also shows the age range. So there's some younger people and also kind of like an adult as well. So we teach a lot of beginners in the area, and they're all very cheap and affordable lessons that cover the cost of the resources to teach the lessons, and then they generate a profit, a very small profit that goes to the hospital. So that was kind of initially the first way that I decided to raise money for Boston Children's. And after teaching golf lessons for a while, I decided that I wanted to raise money through a different way, but also in a way that was related to golf as well. And so the second way that we raise money is through charity golf tournaments. So if you're familiar with golf at all, charity golf tournaments are basically where participants, they pay a certain amount of money, and that covers their whole round of golf plus a little extra, and they understand that it's a charity event. So all of the money they know is going to a good cause. And so Greens for Dreams has run 2 charity events over the last 2 years. The first one was a mini golf tournament. This was in 2020. So we couldn't organize kind of a real tournament at an actual course. So it was just a mini golf tournament. And then last year, we organized a tournament at an actual golf course. And so the charity tournaments are kind of our biggest fundraising vehicle. So we fundraise several $1,000s through these events. And basically they, outside of the entry fees, we also have like an auction, we have raffle prizes, we have various contests that also help to raise money for Boston Children's Hospital. And then the third way that we raise money is through sponsorships and various partnerships with both local companies in the area and also larger national and international corporations. And so these sponsorships mainly serve our tournaments. So for example, like Kyler mentioned, we partner with CVS and also the Boston Red Sox. So for example, they might donate maybe a gift card or even money that can help support our event. And then in turn, we would provide them with marketing. So it's kind of a win-win situation for both parties, in that the sponsorships and partnerships directly contribute to the charity tournaments and help us to raise money for the hospital. And so that's kind of a quick rundown of what Greens for Dreams is. And so now I can talk a little bit about my motivation, what kind of inspired me to start this organization in the first place. So I like to think about it in as 2 different events or kind of developments that motivated me. So the first one was I noticed that there was a high barrier of entry to accessing golf in my community. So what I mean is that golf is a relatively expensive sport compared to most other sports. And so a lot of people who wanted to pick up golf for the first time, they were really hesitant because it was just so expensive. So for example, a lot of times a golf lesson with a professional would cost, over like $100, maybe even $150. And then a set of golf clubs would also cost several $100s. So it was really expensive. And I noticed that a lot of people around me were hesitant to pick up golf, which was a little disheartening to me because I've played golf for so long and it is something that I'm very passionate and care a lot about. So I didn't want like financial barriers to prevent people from picking this sport up. And so one story I like to tell was I had a family friend, and at his company they had a golf league, and he wanted to participate in the league because he was pretty new to the company, so he wanted to meet new people and also find a way to relax and connect after a long work day. And so he wanted to pick up golf, but it was a little too expensive for him, so he kind of waited for a few years, and then he did eventually pick it up, but he just waited for a long period of time because of the high barrier of entry. So I wanted to do something about that. And so that motivated me to start the more affordable golf lessons. So instead of like a $100 or $150 lesson, we made it like $20, $25. So it was considerably less expensive, and it also allowed people to get introduced to the sport as well. And then the second motivation that I like to mention is a local event in my town. So when I was younger, around like 10 or 11 years old, there was a company that proposed building an asphalt plant in my town. And if you don't know, asphalt it's kind of like concrete. So this company wanted to build a concrete producing plant in my town. But unfortunately, this plant would be very toxic. So it would release toxic air, toxic chemicals, other toxins into the atmosphere that would endanger the health of the residents of my town. And so even though this plant was ultimately approved and constructed, it kind of this whole event, it really motivated me to care about healthcare and improving the health of other people that didn't necessarily have the best healthcare or the best resources in their town. And so the low barrier entry and the care about healthcare were kind of my the two causes that inspired me. And then I connected that with my passion for golf and also my expertise and skills with the game of golf to found Greens for Dreams. And that was how I initially started with the golf lessons and raising money for Boston Children's Hospital, but I did expand to the other methods, like I mentioned. So that's kind of my experience with Greens for Dreams and how I started that. So now I'm going to go into each of the steps that I think are important in starting your own community service project. So step one, I think, is definitely to identify your passions, because ultimately you're going to be using these passions to solve, if not solve, contribute to solving a problem. So some questions that could get you thinking are like, what are your interests? What are your passions? What are your skills? What are you good at? So at this time, I would invite you to open the chat and type in what passions or skills you have, and just brainstorm what you think you could use these skills to maybe solve. So I'll wait for a few minutes. So yeah, I see swimming. So I think swimming is a great idea. That's kind of similar to golf, like swimming. Yeah, drawing, definitely. Other activities that maybe people in your community don't really have access to for a variety of reasons, maybe economic reasons, or maybe the local school just doesn't offer say like a certain activity, as it just doesn't offer that certain activity, so you want to introduce it to more people. So yeah, soccer, tennis, as well. Yeah, cubic groups, Legos. Yeah, so all of these activities, I think you could definitely teach other people about. I think that would be one of the best ways of spreading your knowledge. So yeah, clarinet, frisbee, rowing. Yeah, and so good rowing equipment. That also brings up a good point. I know a lot of people, not only in my community but also in other communities, they don't necessarily have access to resources. So I know people who have started nonprofits that are kind of catered towards finding these resources and redistributing to other people. So I think definitely with the rowing equipment, also maybe like soccer equipment, other things. These are all community. So to find a cause, a problem, it doesn't have to be like a societal problem. It can be a problem in your town, maybe even as small as your school that you care about. So yeah, like I said, it doesn't have to be a huge problem, because ultimately those big problems you're not necessarily going to solve, and also those school problems as well, they're probably more accessible, and I think overall all of these problems would be great toward contributing to. And so if you ask yourself that question, you can kind of connect it to your interests, because you want to be using your interests and passions towards solving these problems. So like in my case, like I mentioned, my passion was golf, and then I used that passion to solve a high barrier to entry for golf, and also kind of not everyone having access to healthcare in my local community. And so kind of similar to the last step, I would encourage you to open the chat again and list any problems in your community, and maybe how you could use your passions and how you could connect your passions to that problem. So I'm not seeing anything right now, but I would say, like, based on what you guys said, yeah, so financial problems definitely, like what a lot of you guys said with having skills or passions for various sports. Like I said, a lot of people don't have access to these activities because of socioeconomic problems. So I think definitely lowering the barrier to entry, kind of like I did, would be a great way to connect those two things. Yep, people drowning in the summer, I think that's definitely a huge problem. That would definitely connect your interest in swimming, and I think that would definitely go a long way in saving lives, which is a very significant form of community service as well. Yeah, and then meeting, simulating child's curiosities, that could also definitely connect with the passion. Spreading your ideas, interests to others is definitely a great way to serve others. Yeah, so those are all great ideas of both problems and also interests and ways that you could connect both sides. So third step that I think that comes after you identify those two sides and connect them is to definitely take action, because the first two steps were kind of brainstorming, coming up with ideas. There weren't really any tangible results, and so step three, I think, is the first time where you actually take action and start creating results, even if they're on a very small scale at first. So I think definitely starting by yourself would be okay. So for example, in my case, I did start Greens for Dreams by myself just because I know a lot of people who play golf, but I didn't really know anyone who both want to teach other people and also contribute to the healthcare problem. So I did start by myself, but it's also definitely okay to find a partner who shares your interests. I think if you have other people working on your team, that definitely makes it more efficient, easier to grow, allows for the spreading of new ideas, which is great. And I'll definitely talk about that later, because I did end up forming and expanding my team at my organization. And I think definitely also contributing to growing your organization would be creating a website and social media account. So in my case, I did create a website. It was just using Wix, and my website, it wasn't pretty or anything. And I just had a very basic, or the organization had a very basic Facebook account. But I think these steps are important because, in order to run those events and in order to promote those initiatives and actions that you'll take in the future, you need to make others aware of both what your organization is and what you do and why, and you need to convince other people why they should engage and involve with your organization. And so nowadays, with so much technology, I think creating a website and social media account definitely contributes to that growth and allows you to kind of get your organization off the ground and running and start initiatives in the very near future. So I see a question in the chat. So how do you find the people with the same passions and interests? I think what I would say is to start small in your school. So if you're involved in any clubs, if you're in a club, chances are that people in that club probably have the same interests in you. Maybe if you're on a sports team, so like someone mentioned swimming before as one of their interests. If you're on a swimming team, maybe a lot of people on your swimming team they want to lower the barrier to entry to swimming, and they also want to contribute to something else, such as healthcare issues. So I think definitely starting with groups that you're part of that are based on these interests, that definitely creates a group that has people with similar interests as yourself. And also just, I think a lot of times just asking your friends or family friends, a lot of the times, chances are that people who are your friends also have similar interests. I know a lot of my friends have similar interests. They didn't play golf, but for example, they did have interest in healthcare and other things. So they were able to get involved. So I would say those two ways would definitely help. So I'm going to diverge a little bit and kind of talk shortly about starting a 501c3 nonprofit. So in most cases, you don't need to start a nonprofit in order to do your community service project. So for example, if you're organizing, say, a math tournament or a coding hackathon, you don't need a nonprofit or you don't need 501c3 status, because 501c3 status is basically recognition from the IRS, which is the Internal Revenue Service of the federal government. And it basically makes your organization tax exempt. So what that means is any fundraising that you do, you don't have to pay taxes on that. So for example, if you're organizing a math tournament, chances are you probably aren't really fundraising any money. So it's not really necessary at all to try to get that status. But there are some reasons to start a nonprofit. So like I said, this status makes your organization tax exempt, which is really important if your organization does decide to fundraise. So for example, let's say your organization raises $1,000 and let's just say the tax rate was 20%. So if you had to pay 20% of that $1,000, that's $200. So instead of fundraising the $1,000, you would only get the $800, which is really significant. That's a fifth of the money. And if you imagine if you raised a lot more of that, the government would basically be taking more of that money. And so that 501c3 status really protects all of the fundraising that you do. And then the second reason to start a nonprofit would just be another form of credibility. So like I said, the 501c3 status, it's recognition from the federal government. So that recognition definitely provides a lot of credentials to your organization. And especially if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to partner with other organizations, that those credentials definitely come in hand. So for example, for Greens for Dreams in the past, and also right now, we've been trying to partner with a lot of other organizations and try to receive sponsorships. And in a lot of cases, those other organizations, they want to see that Greens for Dreams or other organizations that are trying to partner have that 501c3 status, because that status means that that company that is sponsoring can kind of trust the nonprofit and that it is doing good work. So I'm not going to spend too long on these steps, but so here are some steps to start the 501c3 nonprofit after you kind of get your community service project off the ground. So the first step, there are kind of two steps. So the first step would be to get your nonprofit approved at the state level. And so to do that, you need at least one adult as the director. And then you need to fill out the articles of incorporation with the state. And you can find that on your state government website. And basically the articles of incorporation, they basically just ask for, your identification information, the adult's information, the what your organization does, how your organization is classified, kind of the technical, kind of the logistical information. And so once you do that, you get an employer ID number, which is kind of similar to, like, I would say, your social security number. So it really identifies your organization as a nonprofit. And so a lot of times when you're trying to partner with those bigger corporations, those corporations will also ask to see your EIN number as well. And that's also kind of another layer of credibility. And so after the state approves your organization to be a nonprofit, which is usually pretty quick and pretty easy, the next step would be to apply for the 501c3 status at the federal level. So this step is usually a little more complex. It usually takes a little more time. So you need to fill out kind of a similar form as well. It's just a little bit longer. It also has a lot of the logistical stuff. So like, describe your organization. What is your mission statement? what is the purpose. You need to have several adults that are like directors, and also you need to establish a board, which is you basically just need to have adults sign on to your organization. So you need to give their personal information as well. And it does cost $275. So like I said before, it is more important to kind of get your project off the ground and start fundraising before you actually apply for this 501c3 status. So for example, in my case, I started Greens for Dreams in 2019, and we did fundraising for almost 2 years before we applied for 501c3 status. And that was one, to raise enough money to kind of take the organization to the next step and get the status, and also to make sure that this was something that would succeed and that we would want to continue in the longer term as well. And so step 4 would be to scale your organization and grow it and try to create a bigger impact in your community. So the first, and I think the most essential step to scaling your organization before you do everything else, would to get more people involved or to branch out. Because I think if you have a project, it's really hard to do it by yourself. I'll also try to plan for a charity tournament while also trying to ask corporations to partner with us. And so what I did was I reached out to a lot of friends, a lot of people that I knew, and tried to get them involved with the organization. And this is important because you can divide up your tasks very easily, and that kind of allows your organization to run more efficiently. So instead of you trying to do everything and trying to juggle everything at once, which can be very disorganized and also just very time consuming, spreading everything out allows one person to really focus on a task and complete that task to the highest potential. And if everyone completes a different task to the highest potential, that really allows your organization to both grow and take on bigger initiatives and create a bigger impact in the end. And then another thing I would say, which is similar, would be to create a chapter in other regions. So for example, if you start, let's say a nonprofit that teaches, that only teaches swimming to other people, maybe you don't need more people in your town to teach swimming because there are only so many people, but you could contact people in, maybe other states, maybe even other countries that would want to do a similar thing as you. And so these people aren't really teaching the same people that you are, but they're really expanding the organization on a geographic level. And then the second thing that I would say after you kind of create that team would definitely be to create an event, because an event is a really tangible form of creating that impact. And so, for example, some things that I came up were like a math tournament, a coding hackathon, maybe an art exhibition if you're interested in art, a music concert, a 5K run, or a bowling tournament. So these things are kind of they're actually very similar to the golf lessons or the charity golf tournament that I created. So kind of everything up to this point has been very logistical and behind the scenes, but this event actually allows you to finally get involved in community and impact community members and create a tangible result. And then the third thing, which would not apply to every organization, but I think a lot of the organizations that you guys mentioned, so like if you're interested in the swimming or the sports organizations or the education, I think definitely corporate sponsorships or at least partnering with other organizations. So for example, in my case, we partnered with Chipotle, CVS, Dick's Sporting Goods, and it doesn't have to be these large corporations. It can also be very small companies. So for Greens for Dreams, not only do we partner with these organizations, but we also reach out to a lot of just like small local businesses, maybe like restaurants, sporting goods stores, things like that. And I think definitely sponsorships and partnerships with other organizations would help to grow your own nonprofit, because that kind of also adds credentials to your organization, because if other corporations or companies, they kind of approve of your nonprofit, that kind of gives you more leverage as well. And also kind of back to the marketing thing, when you partner with another organization, usually you're promoting their organization, and in some cases they're also promoting yours. So if they're promoting yours, that definitely helps to reach more people and reach a larger audience, which could definitely become a potential audience that you could impact. And so step 5, kind of going back to the events. So the next few steps, I'm really going to talk in detail about the events, about the event that you're going to run. So I kind of like to break up the event into 3 different phases. So the before, during, and after. So this phase on this slide is kind of the before phase. So the before phase is all the planning and the logistical stuff that goes into making sure that your event is actually successful on event day. So for example, you would assign members of your team to each aspect of the event. Which, like I said before, through different channels, because obviously if you didn't have this advertising, this marketing, and you didn't have people who would get involved in and participate in your event wouldn't exist at all without these people. And so some forms of promoting your event, I think, would be, for example, social media. So Facebook, Instagram, other forms of social media, even a local online newspaper. So like we reached out to a local newspaper, and we just cold emailed, and we just asked if we could put an advertisement, and they said yes, because other organizations and other people, they also are humans, and they also want to contribute to good causes as well. And so for example, on the bottom left of this slide right here, this is our flyer for our charity tournament this summer. So it's pretty brief. It runs down kind of all the major points, like the entry fee, what's involved in the event, what participants would get out of it, and the goal is to attract the participants to the event. And so we posted that on like social media and also the newspaper, and those definitely helped bring more people to the event. So for example, before we really started advertising for the tournament last year, we only had, I want to say, less than 10 people signed up, even though we had around 70 spots. And then once we really hit the ground with the social media and the other forms of advertising, that really quickly helped to fill up the other spots in the tournament. So I definitely wouldn't underestimate the amount of people in your community that would want to contribute to a good cause. And so step 6 is also kind of the before phase, and that would be paying for your event expenses while fundraising. So yeah, if you're doing fundraising, you obviously do not want to be losing money, because then you won't have any money to donate. And so paying for your event expenses, there are various methods. So for example, if you organized like an art exhibition, you could have an entry fee that would pay for a lot of the costs of setting up your event. And another way, which we used a lot, was the corporate sponsorships, like I mentioned. So that involved a lot of local searches, so internet searches, just searching like donation requests or local companies that donate to nonprofits, just typing that into Google. And by doing that, we were able to find a really long list of both local companies and also those bigger corporations that we were able to just email or fill out forms that they had. And oftentimes they would provide us with various in-kind items or just money. So like an in-kind item would be like an actual product. So for example, Chipotle, they donated a $50 gift card that we could use as a raffle prize in our tournament. And then there are other places like DCU Bank or other local banks that have just donated money that just help to cover the overall expenses of your event. So definitely, like I've emphasized, partnering with other organizations and companies would definitely help to both grow your organization and also run many of your events. So here's one example of asking another company to partner with us and sponsor us. So this example is a donation request form. So a lot of I would say most companies actually, if you just search up donation request form in like your state, so like donation request form in Massachusetts or donation request form in California, there will be a really long list of companies that just pop up, and you can go directly to their donation request forms. And basically all you have to enter is your contact information and then information about your nonprofit. And usually a lot of them ask for proof of 501c3 status, which, like before, goes to show that the credentials are important to other companies that might sponsor you. And so filling out a donation request form that signals to the company that you want them to donate to you. And in a lot of cases, they actually end up they will end up donating to you. So for example, last year we reached out to, I think, around 100 or a little more than 100 companies, and we heard back from 20 that wanted to donate. So that's about 20%, which is not bad. And those 20 companies that did donate, they helped to cover a large part, if not all of the costs of running our event. So kind of the donation request would be the first form of partnering and getting another organization to sponsor you. And then the second way, which can seem daunting at first, but really isn't, is just to send a cold email to a local organization. So there are definitely a ton of restaurants and sporting goods companies and clothing stores in your community that do not have those donation request forms. And so the other way would to just be to send letter. So on the right of the slide right here is just one of the letters that I sent to various companies in my town this year. So it's pretty simple. I just explained kind of what Greens for Dreams does, what our mission is, and what our goals are. And I explained what our event will be. And it's also important to explain what you will give back to that company, because they don't want to just be donating money or goods to your nonprofit. They also want to be getting something in return. And so with this letter, it kind of made up for the lack of the donation request form. And through these two methods of the form and letter, we really, it allows you to really reach out to a lot of companies and to gain support and partnerships, which really help to boost your event and increase your impact. And so this is like the during phase of your event. So I would definitely say to be there first. You don't want to be in a rush. You don't want to get there when everyone else is there and realize that you forgot something or someone is missing. You want your event to run as smoothly as possible, and you want to keep it organized. So you want to put out signs, or for other different types of events, various other ways that help people know where they're going and where they are. You want to display, if you have prizes, raffle items, and auction items, you want to display all those things. And just overall, I would say you want to keep your event just very organized. And one thing that I would definitely not underestimate is your attitude towards those who are involved in your event, because the people who are getting involved are people who are taking time and energy out of their day and who are actively contributing to your cause. So I definitely say, if you're thinking about the long term and hosting future events, not just this one, it's important to have a great attitude towards other people, like greeting them with smiles when they leave, thanking them, and just checking in with them throughout the day. That definitely goes a long way in both getting a good, I would say, image for your organization, and also thinking future events as well. And so this is kind of the follow-up after your event. So also, if you're thinking of the long-term future events as well, it's important to, like I said, thank other people. You obviously want to send out any items that other people may have won or bought. And then I would say lastly, it's really important to just be proud of your achievement, because a lot of people in your school and your community probably are not doing these things that you are. And if they probably are doing community service, they're probably not creating as big of an impact, or yeah, just like as big of an impact as you are. And so I would say, even if it's as simple as, hosting an art exhibition, or teaching a few swimming classes, or hosting a hackathon or math tournament, I think all of these things, no matter how big or small they are, they're contributing to your community and your society. And that's what's important. That's what's important at the end of the day. So I think it's really important to just be proud of your achievement. So that kind of concludes all of like the step-by-step guide of everything that I think is important towards creating your community service project. And so I think at this time, I would invite you to hopefully become a panelist and, unmute, share your ideas. What problems do you see? What ideas do you have for addressing potential issues in your community? Are there any issues that are maybe unsolved, or, you think that you could definitely improve a lot in your community?